Hi, let's get into our next lesson, which is just an extension off of our 13.2 slope lesson. We're going to talk about what if there are parallel and perpendicular lines? What if there are multiple lines on a graph and they're either parallel or perpendicular to each other? They have a specific relationship with their slopes. And let's get into that. So lines in the same plane that do not intersect are parallel lines. Right? That's the definition of a parallel line. They're never going to cross. They'll never touch each other. They're parallel. Parallel lines have the same slope. So that blue line there, which is the line of the graph y equals 1/2 x plus 3, that line is parallel to that red line below, which is the graph of y equals 1/2 x minus 1. If you notice, they're parallel. They will never, ever touch, but their relationship is that they have the same slope. Whatever the slope of the blue line is going to equal and be the same for the red line. Next, we have, well, what if lines in the same plane are perpendicular? So lines in the same plane that intersect at right angles, they're called perpendicular lines. So when two lines do intersect, now they can't just cross over each other, they have to intersect at a right angle. We call them perpendicular. Two lines are perpendicular when the product of their slopes is -1. So if I were to multiply the two slopes together, I should get -1, and that's how we know that they're perpendicular. So if we take a look at that grid there, those two lines, we have a blue and a red one again. The blue and red cross, and it shows you that they form, right here you'll see it, and you might not have looked that closely, but they form a right angle. Remember, there's going to be that little red box, or just a little box in the corner showing that it's a right angle. So we know that they're intersecting and it forms a right angle, so we would say that they're perpendicular. So whatever the slope of the blue line is, if I multiply that by the red line's slope, I should get -1. So the two slopes, so say the slope of the first line times the slope, remember slope is represented by the variable m, if I multiply them together, it should equal -1. Now what that means is that these are inverse slopes. So it's something to know, inverse slopes. Think of what inverse numbers are. Like if I have the number 2, well, what's the inverse of that? Inverse means like opposite, and it also means reciprocal. So what that means is if I have 2, then the inverse of that would be -1/2. If I multiply them together, I get -1. So that's just an example there. So if they're inverse slopes, it means they're opposite reciprocals. Remember, reciprocals when you flip that fraction. Like here, the number 2 would be 2/1. If I flip it, I would get 1/2. So that's really what that means. So perpendicular, we're thinking inverse slopes, whereas parallel, we are thinking that they are equal to each other. They have equal slopes. They're the same exact thing. Let's do some examples together. Which two lines are parallel, and how do you know? So in order to figure out what lines are parallel, we have to figure out what the slope of each line is. So let's take a look at this first line. We might want to call it the blue line or line number 1. If you printed it out, it might be in black and white. So we can just label these as like 1, 2, 3. You can always do that. Again, you can label it if you have it in color, or since we're looking at the video in color, we could say this is the blue line. We're going to find the slope of that. Again, you can label it line 1 if you want. Then we'll find the slope of the red line, or line 2. And then we'll find the slope of the green line, or line 3. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to find the slope of each line. If you want to, you could go directly on the graph from one point, do your rise over your run. So I rose 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope for the blue would be 4 over, and then I went over 1. So my slope would be 4/1, or just 4. Or you could use your equation if you wanted to, right? We have these points that they gave us. We could subtract our y values. So I could do 3 minus, it's a -2, over, my 3 is with a 1, minus 0. Keep, change, I get 5 over 1, or 5. So far our blue and red lines don't have the same slope. We have a slope of 4, and then we have a slope of 5. So now we have to find what the slope of the green line is, and then whichever one it matches is going to be the parallel line. So green, you can decide to do it whichever way you want, directly on the graph. Do your rising, count how many do I rise, and then how many do I run. Or you could set up your equation like I did for the red line. Do your y minus y over x minus x. Either way, our slope, I got to be 4 over 1, which equals 4. So what does this mean? We want to know which two lines are parallel. I would say, remember parallel, they have to have an equal slope. So this one's 4, this one's 4. So that means that lines 1 and 3, or lines blue and green, are parallel. So lines 1 and 3 are parallel. Again, or you could say blue and green. However you want to label it, I'll take it either way. But they are our parallel lines. That's our answer there. So when they're asking which two lines are parallel, you're looking for the slopes of all the lines. Whichever ones are equal are parallel. Now they want us to know which two lines are perpendicular. So perpendicular, we're looking for which lines cross and form a right angle, right? It might not show us, but if they don't show us that they form a right angle, which I'm looking at this graph, I don't see any right angles. But my other piece of information that I know is if they're perpendicular, the product of their slopes is -1. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to find all of their slopes and then maybe find the products of them, and whichever ones equal -1 then will be the perpendicular lines. So again, let's write out. We have to find the slope of the blue, red, and the green line. We can label it, if you have it black and white, do 1, 2, 3. So we have our blue line, or line 1. We have our red line, or line 2. And then we have our green line, or line 3. However you want to name it. I am not picky about that. Do whatever makes you happy. All that I care about is that you find the slope of each of these now. So now the blue line. I'm going to use the equation for all of these just so we can get more practice and you can see me using that equation. We're going to look at the 2 points that are given for this blue line. So I have the point -5, 6 and 1, 4. I'm going to do my y values. I'm going to subtract them. So I have 6 and 4. So I'm going to do 6 minus 4 over, my 6 is with the x value -5, so I'm going to keep that below it, minus 1. So 6 minus 4 is 2. -5 minus 1, or maybe you're thinking they have the same signs, so add them and keep that sign. This would give us -6, which then simplifies down to a slope of -1/3. Do the same thing for the red. This time our points are -5, 0 and 2, -2. Let's subtract our y values. So I have -2 minus 0 over our x values would be 2 minus a -5. -2 minus 0 gives me -2 over +2 minus a -5. You might want to do keep, change. That gives us a +7. So my slope here equals -2 over 7. And let's lastly do the green line. Our slope here, we have the points, I might need to look closely. We have 0, 5, and -2, -2. So I'm going to subtract my y values. So I have -2 minus 5 over negative 2 minus 0. Keep, change, same signs. Now we're going to add, keep that same sign. I have negative 7 over negative 2. Now negative and a negative gives us a positive. So my slope equals positive 7 over 2. Now you might be able to look at these slopes and know which ones are perpendicular. Or you might have to take each one and multiply them each together to see which gives you negative 1. Doesn't matter how you do it, but remember, we are looking for inverse slopes. So up top here, remember I told you inverse slopes are what it means when their products are negative 1. Inverse, I told you opposite reciprocals. So they have to be opposite. I need a positive and I need a negative. And then I need them to be reciprocals. I need them to be flipped. So if I'm looking here, I don't see any other 1/3 or 3 anywhere. So I'm going to eliminate that. This one is negative 2 over 7. This one's positive 7 over 2. So I have a negative, I have a positive, and then those fractions are flipped. So that works. Now something that you could do is you could check yourself. So I'm going to say like lines 2 and 3 or red and green are perpendicular, but let me just double check myself real quick. I want their products to equal negative 1. Well, that's 1 and 1, 1 and 1. Negative times a positive gives me a negative 1, so I know I'm right. So lines 2 and 3 are perpendicular. That's our answer here. Take a minute, look over all of that work. Make sure you understand the difference between parallel and perpendicular.